We are Team Work from Homies, and we are here tonight to uncap our BeerSmith Refresh project. My name is Andrea Photiou, and my favorite beer is Psychedelic Catgrass.
This is Georgia Freels, and my favorite beer is Heady Topper.
And I am Michael Steinbrenner, and my favorite beer is Zombie Dust.
All right, let's get into it. So which of the following of these images would you guess is the oldest? Beer, bronze, or wine? If you aren't thinking beer, my guess is you probably drink Bud Light. So beer is actually one of the oldest drinks that humans have produced. And the first confirmed beer dates back to the 5th millennium BC in Iran. And this delicious and nutritious beverage quickly spread across the world, and it's enabled human culture and society to grow and develop into what we know present day. So if you consider yourself a human, you have beer to thank. So what is BeerSmith? Historically, beer recipes and the calculations for brewing were traditionally captured through spoken word, then onto the tablet, and eventually ink and paper. But today, modern homebrewers use brewing software to figure out their calculations and to help them with the brewing process. So many homebrewers rely on the industry-old standard BeerSmith. And although BeerSmith does offer a functional working solution, as you can see from these lovely screen grabs, there's a little bit to a lot to be improved from the UX and the interaction design. So it's the 21st century, and users really want connectivity, they want syncing across their devices, and they really want a software that integrates with current and modern devices. Which leads us to our project goal, which is to refresh and expand the home brewing application BeerSmith in order to streamline the brewing process for both experienced and novice brewers. So our first step was to research and immerse ourselves in the brewing culture, software, and the overall experience of how someone becomes a hobby brewer. And then we analyzed our research to capture our findings and reflections to inform our decisions later on. And those activities propelled us into the ideation stage, where we came up with tons of ideas for prototyping. So we conceptually designed for the new and improved BeerSmith ecosystem. And as good designers do, we then gathered feedback and applied those findings to a more detailed design solution. And we were able to conduct a usability test on that. And as you guessed it, we then iterated again on this design, and that brings us to the current state today. So I'll kick us off with our user research. So our first step in drinking in the home brewing culture, if you will, was to conduct some contextual interviews with current or prospective homebrewers. So we curated a variety of experience levels from novice to professionals. And one of the most profound and common learnings that we discovered from these interviews was just how frustrating it can be to get started. If you don't know what you're doing, or if you've made a mistake along the way, you're gonna end up with a really bad tasting beer and a bad taste of the hobby in your mouth. So we knew right away that we wanted to aid these individuals to navigate this hobby more successfully. We also visited a home brewing hobby store to learn some of the more commonly asked questions from store patrons from the retailer's perspective. We thought that was super unique. So as you may have guessed, we also learned that home brewing books are not selling like they used to. And not only were they half off, but they were coated in dust. And after that, we then took to social listening research, and we coded over 450 data points specific to homebrewing software in the market today. So we learned of the anxiety of data and recipe loss, how important customization is to our users, and uncovered a desire for consistency in their experience across the app and the website. And one of the most important things we learned was the unmet need to support users through the entirety of the brewing process. So from the start all the way to the end. And then in order to gain further resources and insights, we expanded our research methods into a cross-industry competitive benchmarking exercise. So not only did we look at the beer industry, but we also looked at the wine, food, and trade industry to see what kind of software opportunities they are using, what works well, what doesn't. And we found some great commonalities between them all with community tools, calculation and tracking methods, learning opportunities, and recipe recommendations. And so through all of this really extensive research, we identified some key themes from our findings, such as how complex the brewing process is. It's a really tricky process with loads of opportunity to customize things along the way, but you still need to be very consistent and precise in order to have a successful brew. So our users need to brew consistently, but also be able to do everything differently. So you can see how people can be nervous to get started. So this paradox really highlights the importance of the learning resources and community that we really wanted to develop for our users to feel supported, successful, and continue using BeerSmith as their home brewing software of choice. And so from all of this extensive research, we put together this beautiful user journey map, and we asked ourselves why people would start the home brewing process, where would they go for their information and curate those resources, how can they feel successful in those early brews, what happens if they don't, and how do they kind of fit into the home brewing community at large. And this activity really helped us gather that start of the brew process to end of the brew process insight to help us design for those unmet needs like our users desired. So after we created this user journey map, we started into persona creations, and we really wanted to get a range of depth and breadth in these. So we explored multiple different personas at varying levels of new brewer vantage points through the beer goggles of the experienced brewer. We wanted to know their needs, their goals, their pain points, all of these different things. And then we actually took all of our user personas and we walked through our user journey map in order to understand the start to end process from each individual persona's perspective. And as you may have guessed, all of these activities really gave us a ton of ideas. We were so excited to get started. So we started to put these ideas down on virtual paper, of course, and organize them into this affinity map. And this activity really helped us deepen our understanding of our users' needs and pain points and recognize just how large this ecosystem could really be.
So moving on to the actual ideation and conceptual design process. Like Andy said, in order to generate our ideas, we base them on our affinity diagrams, our journey maps, and our personas. And we all split up, generated 8 to 10 ideas, and then came back. After that, we rated our ideas based on a predetermined design criteria. As you can see in the red circle, each person went through and gave each idea a rating of 1 to 5. Here is said idea evaluation design criteria. As you can see on the left, our main 3 things that we focused on were the benefit to the user, how easy it was for people to use it, whether novice or expert, as well as how interesting or creative the idea was. So after narrowing down what seemed like 1,000 ideas and rating them, we chose the top rated ones. As you can see, we've got our conceptual designs here. Firstly, we've refreshed the website on the left-hand side. This is where users will learn more about the BeerSmith. They'll learn about the resources they have that BeerSmith offers, and they'll also download the software. So this is a very important touch point for users to utilize. Next, we've got the software refresh, which is the actual BeerSmith software. This is just a little mobile version, but we've done a desktop version as well. And then these last 3 are actually new features to BeerSmith. We've got the equipment share, which is basically just searching for equipment that you need for specific brews around the city or local places where you could trade or purchase from other brewers. The sample kit, which is where a user will pick 6 beers to try, and they will get them mailed to their house. then they will try them, and then they can choose which beer they want to homebrew. And then the brew crew, where it's a function where many users will start a brew on the same day, and they will start the same brew, so they're able to collaborate and brew the same beer at the same time. So let's move on to our detailed design. For our interface, we decided to go with a funky and a cool color scheme that complements the earthiness and the creativity involved with home brewing. Here are a couple of initial prototypes that we have. On the top left is that Brew Crew app. Top right is the equipment finder. Then the bottom left is software refresh. And then we have the website refresh. So let's take a look at these details of these prototypes. First, we've got the website refresh where users can download and get resources for BeerSmith. The legacy design was lacking in a couple of areas that our users really needed. There was no logical information hierarchy. Everything was laid out on the screen very randomly, very chaotically. There was simply too much information on the page, as well as no consistency between the app and the website. So the new design has a simple interface with only a few critical options, as well as a much more logical information architecture. This page needed a big overhaul because it's the first place where users will interact with BeerSmith, as well as the hub for all downloads and resources, like I said. If users aren't able to navigate this page and use the website properly, then we'll be in trouble with our software. So we had to make sure this one was good. We have a little storyboard we'd like to show you guys for the website. Hopefully the sound works. It doesn't look like it. Sorry, guys. Cool. So next, let's take a look at the Brew Crew app. This is actually a new feature in BeerSmith, so it's difficult to compare the legacy design and the new design. The reason we created this feature was because in the legacy design, there was poor collaboration and troubleshooting tools, which is very essential to new brewers, which is, like Andy said, why a lot of them stopped the hobby. With the introduction of the new Brew Crew, users can now chat and troubleshoot with their friends who are brewing the same beer at the same time. And this collaboration tool is very helpful for new users to make a successful first brew. So here we have a storyboard for the Brew Crew. So lastly, we have the detailed design of the software refresh, which is the meatiest and the most important thing possibly. This is the most important design change because we implemented, sorry, I lost my place. This is the most important design change we implemented because it's where users will spend most of their time. when users are brewing, this is where they'll be. This is where they'll be checking their data, checking their warts, all that kinds of stuff. The legacy design, to say the least, was a mess. So the information hierarchy was confusing. The interface was dark and boring. And like we said earlier, a lot of new users were totally overwhelmed by the amount of choices they had, and they had no guidance whatsoever. So as you can see in the updated design, it has a clear navigation hierarchy and many helpful tools to assist and encourage new users to brew a successful beer. And lastly, we've got the storyboard for that. This also includes the sample brew kit. All right, so now we will get into usability evaluation.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Those videos always make me smile. So as we dug into all of these different resources, we came to the end of the semester and realized, okay, we've got a certain amount of time and a certain number of participants we can recruit. We really need to narrow our scope for usability evaluation and mature one of these prototypes. So we decided to take the software refresh to this final stage and complete the usability evaluation with that prototype. But we wanted to be very thorough. We really wanted to run it through its paces. We knew we had one round of usability evaluation. So we decided to use 4 different methods. We used a think aloud task completion, a first click test, a heuristic evaluation, as well as an accessibility evaluation. The first method we talked about is the think aloud task completion. We created a standardized method as documented in our study plan, our research plan, and we asked the users to give their first impression of 3 different screens and then to complete 3 tasks. Ultimately, all of our 4 participants were successful in completing the tasks, but they gave us some really good feedback. The interface is busy, the color scheme could be improved, and the overall hierarchy is understandable but not perfect. So we wrote down that information and kept on testing. The next method we used was a first click evaluation. We leveraged software within Amazon Mechanical Turk to recruit 10 participants to evaluate the current software as well as our proposed software. With this method, why is a first click important? Well, the first click signifies where the user is going to start their journey and to complete a critical task. And studies show that if they can correctly select where to start, they will 87% of the time complete that task. So it's a really important telltale and indicator for us to know that our users are going to be successful in completing their critical tasks. And as you can see with these percentages on the right, we had an 80%, our lowest score was at 80%, but we had 90 and 100% success in our other methods. So we were very happy that user would be able to support these critical tasks. Next, we sat down with some experts and asked them to evaluate using heuristics and benchmarks and their experience to evaluate our design. And here's what we came up with. Our 2 participants or 2 experts showed that, once again, our hierarchy needs some work. Things like, hey there, Josie is emphasized when maybe potentially that is not the most critical piece of information on this page. We had poor system visibility. While the timeline on the bottom is a good iteration, we need to continue to rethink that. And how can we provide more information to the user so they have an understanding of where they sit within the system and within the process of brewing a beer. We lack consistency. We had some, font size confusion, text type confusion. And then ultimately, the last one that was most disappointing to us as human-centered designers was the inaccessibility to individuals with color blindness. We had a color palette that included some pretty poor contrast. So our fourth method was to evaluate our contrast more thoroughly. Oh, there's my arrows. And here we go with that accessibility evaluation. So on our foreground and our background, we selected 5 different foreground background combinations that we used within our design and evaluated them on a contrast ratio of 4.5. And we saw that 3 of the 5 combinations that we tested failed. That means that this iteration fails, and we need to go back to the drawing board and really iterate to improve the design. So that's what we did. We iterated. Next slide. We wanted to choose a color palette that was moving away from fun and bright and more towards bold and refined, but while still steering clear of the lame, old data-centric design of the BeerSmith legacy design. So we landed somewhere, I think there's a animation. Oh, okay. We landed somewhere right there in the middle between fun and serious with a bold and refined color palette, which, spoilers, looks something like this. So as you see, we have those warm color tones, but reminiscent of beer, reminiscent of being in your favorite brewery, while also keeping a very, very strong focus on contrast and accessibility, which all played into our design iteration, which we're going to go through with a quick video here. So you recognize that we maintained the layout, but we added some core changes, such as changes in the text, changes in the accessibility. I think you paused it. Oh, no, there we go. And then we've got this guidance. So the user joins the website for the first time or the software for the first time, and they're guided through the information available. The user is also able to close and remove sections such as BeerSmith Trivia, Brew Crew All A's, and further reduce the content that's on the screen. We also rethought the timeline down at the bottom to show them what step they're on. And then each one of the timeline checkpoints will guide them to more information. Cool. And then keeping the main thing, center and focus, large in our hierarchy is the how do you brew a beer? So that's the experience you're watching now, is the user going through the experience of starting a brew, building it into their brew crew, and then guiding them through the critical pieces of information, such as a recipe tracker and all the different steps for that brew. Awesome. And that takes us to our conclusion. We wanted to begin with just a reflection. What would we tell us if we were starting this degree over, or if we were starting our capstone over? And ultimately, we would tell ourselves to trust the process. Design thinking is rigorous. It's very time consuming, but it's really, really important. And it results in really incredible, innovative ideas. Listen to your users. User research is so critical, and it's essential that we complete thorough usability studies, thorough user research, so that you understand exactly what your user needs are and where your design is falling short. And again, like I said, iteration, as you saw in the 3 different iterations of design work that we presented, each one grew significantly. Inclusivity, so needs to be intentional. It's easy when you're thinking about the 90%. And only working with people of, certain types. It's important that you be considerate and think about how you can be more inclusive with your design. And then set reasonable goals. As we learned when we got to the end, we weren't able to test and evaluate all of our results and all of our prototypes, and that was disappointing to us. So we wish we had set more reasonable goals and a smaller scope to begin with. But ultimately, have fun, as Dr. Kim always says. And that's it from us here at the Work From Homies team. Cheers to you guys.
All right, great. Thank you for your great presentation. And okay, Dr. Shambo and Dr. Feng Zhao, do you have any questions and comment, suggestions?
I think
Yes, go ahead.
sure and how do you incorporate inclusive design in the process?
Your audio was a little bit fused. So would you please ask it again? Uh-oh. Dr. Fengzhou, would you please ask through the chat while the Dr. Shambo is asking? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess Dr. Fengzhou has some technical issues with his Wi-Fi. Well, first of all, congratulations. I really enjoyed your presentation. And also, generally speaking, I really love the environment of the whole class here. Everybody is being so supportive to each other. That's very nice to see. Yeah, so I really love it. And this project, this specific presentation, you guys did a very good job specifically, systematically starting from the user needs data, then you did the journal mapping, then you did the prototyping thinking, then the redesign iterations. So if I give you one more chance, what part of the study you will reconsider to redesign?
I think given the chance, we would focus a lot more on the actual software. That was kind of, when we looked back and we were talking about our project overall, that was one area where we thought, if we would have just focused on just the software specifically from day one, we would have been able to take it a lot further and make it a lot more helpful for our users. Personally, I really enjoyed the Brew Crew app, and I would have loved to have been able to test that out because I could see that being a very helpful feature for users. But my teammates, feel free to chime in if you have any other thoughts.
No, but my answer kind of ties into Feng Zhao's question.
Can you explain briefly how do you incorporate the inclusive in the design process and how can you do better? That is a question. Right.
Yeah, I think my answer kind of ties into both of them. What would I do differently? I think we could have fought a little harder to find home brewers that were female or people of color or had any or associated as any one of those types of people. We focused on what was accessible to us and who we could readily interview. And I think if we had fought a little harder to try and reach out outside of our network, that would have been a great way to just be more inclusive. Because if our goal is to help people and help home brewers and bring in new people, I think ultimately a more intentional look at how we could be more inclusive at the beginning would have brought more of that into our design at the end stages.
Great. Okay. Any other question or comment? Suggestion?
Yeah, maybe one last question, comment. So yeah, I also appreciate you guys have tried to include inclusive design, like try to address the colorblind person's needs over there. You guys did have a slide to show that. So my question is that basically, how you select all the colors of your interface? Well, I know you guys did some of the testing, but to be honest, those colors are like very male towards it. But maybe that is true because the beer brewing company is more towards the male customers. But I'm just curious how you select those colors.
Yeah, that's a great question. Michael, could you actually take us back to our design slide where we have kind of our vision board? So originally our color scheme landed in this fun, bright, and bold area, and that was kind of curated from some different beer companies that we really liked. We had this really great presentation that we'd been working through the class period with that teal and amber and red color scheme, and we thought that it was really fun and energetic and inviting. But then when we really reflected on the accessibility use. We tried to kind of play with that still fun, bright, and funky color scheme, but we were really struggling to make it look nice. And we really wanted to tie in like visual design principles and into our updated GUI. And so that's what kind of led into this. All right, let's just take a step back here. Let's create this activity, this board. Let's throw down the words that we think can capture the different areas and directions we could take with this design. And then let's try and pull in some images and imagery and really start brainstorming on who is BeerSmith? Where do they land within this ecosystem of craft brewing and the different personas and personalities within the industry? And that's kind of how we landed in this bold and refined with a little bit of flair. So we tried to keep our color scheme muted but flared. And so that kind of also brought in that darker brown and more beer toned representation. So we were trying to bring in some realism. And then for the flair, we had that brilliant gold streak carrying throughout with some gradients and a little bit of pizzazz.
There's also some feedback that from previous BeerSmith users that they're like, oh, it's too different. I'm lost. And so we were trying to kind of not shock the system by taking it from, black on white to vibrant colors. So this was our midway point.
Okay.
Because although we wanted to attract new brewers, we didn't want to alienate the existing users of the system.